Yippee-ki-yay, melon farmer. Same name, different game, Die Hard. Hello and happy holidays. Welcome to the year's final episode of Same Name, Different Game. To celebrate the season, we're taking a look at two games based on the gold standard of action cinema and a personal Christmas favorite, Die Hard. So let's get started, as always, with a little history. Based on the novel Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe, Die Hard is a 1988 film that launched the career of Bruce Willis. It was one of the top 10 highest-grossing films of that year, so besides launching Willis's career, it also launched a franchise. There are, to date, 4 sequels, with a 5th currently in development. The film sees Willis as New York detective John McClane visiting his estranged wife Holly in Los Angeles for Christmas. While at her office Christmas party, a group who appear to be terrorists led by a man named Hans Gruber take over the building. John escapes in the chaos, but in such a rush that he doesn't have his shoes. What follows is arguably the greatest action film in history. A film so great that it started its own subgenre of action cinema in the years to come. We got Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard at a Pittsburgh Penguins game. Sure, why not? Anyways, Die Hard is a hard R action film from a time when studios didn't seem terrified to release those. It's extremely violent, has a lot of swearing, and even a bit of nudity. This, of course, means that it was ripe for adaptation to a medium that was largely considered at the time to be for children: video games. As it happens, the first console Die Hard game is the first game we'll be covering for this episode. It's Die Hard for the PC Engine, or the Japanese Turbografx 16. This game was released exclusively in Japan in 1990, developed by Pack-In Video, and published by Nichibutsu, just in time for the theatrical release of Die Hard 2: Die Harder. Die Hard for the PC Engine never hit the US for a variety of reasons. In a 2014 interview with Christian Nutt for Gamasutra, former NEC employee Carol Balcom said NEC decided to create a brand new business in the United States and do it all, to distribute the hardware and the software. Since the US rights to Die Hard video games were sewn up by Activision, NEC would have had to shell out to sub-license, what with them wanting to distribute everything themselves. And this also would have been a problem. In the same feature from Gamasutra, ex-NECer John Brandsetter said, "If we gave Japan a lineup, a list of what we thought would be the killer lineup for Christmas, we maybe got 1 out of the 10 or 15 titles we asked for." The sad truth is just that the Turbografx 16 was not handled very well in North America. Something like Die Hard almost certainly would have sold on the basis of name recognition alone, but it, along with Batman and many others, were left in Japan. Consider this: there were 94 officially released American Turbo Chip games. In Japan, there were 289 officially released titles in that same format. This gets even worse when you start looking at CD-based games. In Japan, there were over 400 CD-based games, while the US got a paltry 45. But I digress. Listen, I could talk about the PC Engine and games history all day, but I'm afraid work must intrude. Die Hard for the PC Engine is a fairly middling overhead shooter in the vein of Commando or Ikari Warriors. It also does a pretty poor job of following the story of the movie. John starts outside the Nakatomi building and has to fight his way through a forest and then a swamp to get inside. He then enters through the basement and works his way up to the roof. John doesn't start with a weapon, but 4 are available. A single-shot rifle, a grenade launcher, a flamethrower, and now I've got a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. Each has a finite amount of ammo, but they're plentiful enough that you won't often find yourself without a gun. The machine gun is most balanced, and the flamethrower is the most powerful. There are other pickups for health. Beer recovers a little bit of health, and a first aid kit recovers a lot of it. The stages are mostly straightforward, with the exception of Stage 3's obnoxious maze. If you go through a wrong door, you can get sent all the way back to the beginning, and there is a time limit, so beware. Also, while it appears John is wearing shoes here, one stage does have broken glass on the ground that can damage him, like the movie. But, I mean, in the game, he goes into the building of his own accord from the outside, so why isn't he wearing shoes? Anyways, there are 10 stages here, but only 3 boss fights. First you face Tony, who throws knives and uses... I guess that's an extendable riot baton, maybe? Who knows. But he looks like Andreas Wisniewski at least. Later, you face Tony's brother Carl, who alternates between shooting at you and blowing up the floor you're standing on. Again, his sprite is a pretty good likeness of actor Alexander Godunov. The final boss is a helicopter you face on the roof. Is that supposed to be the Agent Johnson's? Because Hans never gets close to a helicopter in the film. Now, I've seen this game get slagged off in a number of places, and honestly, I don't think it's that bad. It's a middling run-and-gun shooter. Also, while most of the text is in Japanese, it's not that important, but if you're dying to know what John is saying, you can download the translation patch for the ROM, which is available readily online. Now, in 1991, developer Pack-In Video was at it again with our second game for this episode, Die Hard for the NES, published by Activision. NES Die Hard is a completely different game than Pack-In's first run at adapting the film. It's ostensibly an overhead run-and-gun shooter as well, but once you start playing, you realize it's more than that. It more closely resembles an adventure game. Yeah, you heard that right, an adventure game. I mean, look at it. There are different key items you need to progress, multiple events that can be set off but aren't necessary, and different endings. And I think this is why this version has a less than stellar reputation. People are expecting, I don't know, Contra or something, and what they get is something much different. In this version, you are told from the beginning that there are only 40 enemies inhabiting the building. Once you kill 39 of them, you can face Hans, but it takes more than that. It takes finding certain items and performing certain actions, because like the film, your time is limited. Compounding this is the fact that John has a separate energy bar for his feet, and once it bottoms out, you move a lot slower. Fortunately, you can get first aid kits to recover your foot energy. And you'll need to, because Theo and Hans are in communication, and the vault of the Nakatomi building is being broken down bit by bit. If the crooks escape with the $640 million in negotiable bearer bonds, you lose. Speaking of Theo, unlike the PC Engine game or Die Hard trilogy, this game makes use of the film's wide supporting cast. Al, Holly, and Theo all appear in the game. In fact, even the Agent Johnsons, or, well, at least the Agent Johnson's helicopter will appear in the correct context if you take the proper actions. And that's what I really like about this game, the variability. Like more traditional adventure games, once you know exactly what to do, the game can be completed pretty quickly. But discovery is part of the fun. And even when you do know what you're doing, the location of certain key items changes from playthrough to playthrough. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. The combat can be frustrating. Health recovery items are obnoxiously limited, and there are no continues without the use of a code. I can see why people don't like this game, but to me it's an extremely ambitious title for the system that just falls a little short of what it could have been. Still, with all of its nods to the source material and an actual face-off with Hans, which a lot of other Die Hard games are oddly lacking, I think it's worth your time to at least give it a test drive. We've talked before on this show about how much more powerful the PC Engine is than Nintendo's humble gray box, but let's take a look and a listen side by side to see how Pack-In Video's work stacks up on the NES versus the Japanese Turbografx. In both cases, I don't think the music is much to write home about, especially since neither uses the Michael Kamen score from the film. And while the graphics are objectively better on the PC Engine, I like the look of the NES game more. The levels are more complex and better represent the movie. And that makes it time to give the edge. And I gotta say, for me, it's the NES version. Sure, the PC Engine one looks better, but this game is much more unique, it's much more ambitious in its scope, and for me, that makes it a more satisfying play. Now, if you want to play either of these games in their original formats, it's gonna cost you a pretty penny, I'm afraid. The PC Engine version is cheaper than the NES version, but it's still not what I would call cheap, especially given the fact that PC Engine games in general are cheap, and there's a lot better games that you could buy with the same money it would take to get a copy of Die Hard. The NES version is grossly overvalued in my estimation. It's not terribly rare, but due to the license, it is pretty expensive. It goes for about $80 to $100 these days, and any vintage game is a hard sell at that cost. I got mine a lot cheaper because I knew I wanted it and I'd been shopping for over a year. I was very vigilant and I happened to catch one at a good price point. But if you don't have the patience or the desire to shell out that kind of money, maybe you're best off just booting up an emulator to give these a run. And that's it. That is it for the Christmas special of Same Name, Different Game, and Merry Christmas to you, or Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Happy New Year, whatever you celebrate, whatever you're celebrating, I hope you have a happy one. We'll be back in 2016 with more game comparisons and more game history, and I hope you'll join us then. See you next year.
Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping, and I brought some corn for popping. The lights are turned way down low. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. When we finally kiss goodnight, how I hate going out in the storm. But if you really hold me tight, all the way home I'll be warm. The fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're still goodbying. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.